Well, hello out there. I'm T.M. Brown, and welcome to the next reading from my very first book, A Life Not My Own. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you, and I just want to say thank you for the folks that are subscribing, liking, and sharing my readings. It means the world to me. My intent is to share more than you'd experience if you read the book on your own, just giving you more tidbits into my life. You may decide that you'd like to read along with me, which I believe would be really cool. So feel free to grab a copy of my book, A Life Not My Own, from my website, www.authortmbrown.com. We started with the very first page of the book, and we're going to work our way through the book. Are you ready? I hope that you're ready for this next installment. So here we go. This particular chapter is called The Early Daze. What does it truly mean to be a parent? Providing 3 meals a day, a roof overhead, and clothes on the backs of children is just the beginning. Well, let's start with a parent's love or lack thereof. What does it mean to grow up without a parent's love? Can it be substituted for anything else? I felt that there was only one good quality that I possessed when I was a child that Betty seemed to be proud of. I was very good in school. It was always assumed that I would get good grades, and I always did. In my mother's eyes, being the daughter of a drug addict did not mean that I could use that as an excuse. Hell, her drug addiction wasn't even supposed to be known. I found school to be one of the few places where doing the right thing was rewarded and the rules of the game weren't constantly changing. I was blessed with not having to work too hard to make good grades. Betty's requirements on my behavior at school gave me all the reinforcement that I needed to ensure that notes from the teacher were never sent home. Often, I was chosen to speak at school assemblies, assist a child who was having difficulty with a particular subject, or stay after school to help the teacher correct homework assignments. These events made me feel special and important, reinforcing my desire to learn. It was a sure thing. If I did well on a test, recited a poem without making a mistake, or helped a classmate scholastically improve, then I would be rewarded with the attention that I wanted and so badly needed. This attention usually came in the form of a teacher's kindness, a smile, or even just a pat on the shoulder. For me, these gestures were the substitutions that I received for the lack of hugs and kisses received at home. There was no doubt in my mind that my teachers knew of the circumstances in which I lived. The rationale behind their lack of intervention is still unclear to me. I must say that most of the teachers were white, and in the 1960s were a strange time. It was a time when helping one another was in. Blacks and whites were trying to understand one another and find a way to interact, moving away from the stereotyping, which was partially a result of living in ethnically and racially separated communities. Within Baltimore City at that time, there weren't any signs indicating the various racial borders, but one needed only to cross the invisible borderline and it would become quite evident that they had done so. Crossing into the wrong neighborhood would, at the very least, result in dirty looks. There were times when young blacks were literally chased out of white neighborhoods. The time of black cooks, maids, and washwomen were gone, Therefore, to see a black face in a white neighborhood for the most part was unwanted. Considering the time frame of my youth, which was in the 60s, I'm not sure my white teachers expected me to be expected my life to be any different than what it was. I believe that some of the teachers recognized that I was brighter than most of the students, but none seemed compelled to rescue me. There were teachers who took me under their wings, of course, showed me a little extra attention, and told me how bright I was, but never once inquired about my life at home. There were times when I just wanted to stay at school. I mean, if just one of my teachers had just stepped up and asked those hard questions, my life may have been very different. But I guess that just wasn't my path. I wore the same blue plaid dress to school every day. This was a dress that I washed out every night along with my only pair of panties and white socks that I owned. Betty would buy really big bars of soap that I used to wash the clothes that Mac and I wore to school. Thank God the soap didn't melt too easily and had a very strong fragrance. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we would have smelled going to school. To me, attending school was similar to going to a fancy hotel in comparison to our life at home. This was true even within a Baltimore inner city public school in the 1960s. This was a time when the Department of Education supplied everything to its students: books, pencils, paper, meals, and transportation. The school supplies, in my mind, they seemed to be abundant. There was toilet paper at school, too. At home, there was an old shoebox with used paper bags and old newspapers strategically located beside the toilet. We would rub the paper together until it was soft enough to use for toilet paper. I'm sorry, I know for some of you this may sound harsh, but I want you to understand what it was like to live in Baltimore City with a mom who had a drug problem during this time. Every once in a while, I would sneak a little toilet paper home from school. I was very careful not to let Betty know about this. I keep the toilet tissue tucked in my panties until I needed it. During my elementary school years, my school began providing free breakfast and lunch to its underprivileged students. Mac and I were enrolled in both of these programs. It literally saved our lives. Without the programs, every day would have been the same as Saturday and Sunday usually were, with very little to eat. Some of the kids would tease us. Look at them, they're hungry. No, we ain't. Then how come you eating so fast? Ha ha ha. Say what? So what? Singing. They would break out in songs saying, your mama on the welfare, your mama on the welfare, your mama on the welfare. The teasing wasn't even an issue in comparison to the hunger that we felt. Mac and I would ignore the children who were there for the same reason as we were, to get at least 1 or 2 hot meals a day. And I want you guys to really hear this, because I know there's a lot of talk even today about doing away with these kinds of programs. But I can tell you firsthand that these programs, lunch and free lunch and breakfast, saved our lives. The State of the Union reached all the way to my stomach in those days. If it were not for government-run programs specifically targeting poor inner city children, Mac and I would have had a lot more days of hunger. The free meal program was a guarantee that Mac and I could have a decent breakfast and lunch every weekday. I am so happy that the majority of you who are listening to this have no idea what it is to really be hungry. That feeling that you have when you're standing in the line at McDonald's isn't even close to what real hunger feels like. Let me tell you what real hunger feels like. Real hunger keeps you awake at night. It makes you cry from the pain in the very bottom of your stomach. It makes you attempt to eat anything in sight, consumes your every thought, and will not go away until it's appeased. I remember being so hungry from a weekend without food that Mac and I went to school the following Monday entirely too early. Tina and Jean, do you know what time it is? No, ma'am. Well, it's 6:30 in the morning. Does your mother know where you are? Thinking fast. Well, she had to go to work early this morning, and I forgot to ask her what time we were supposed to leave for school. I didn't want us to be late. Well, school doesn't start for another 2 hours or so. Y'all come on in here anyway. It's cold out there. Have you had any breakfast this morning? No, ma'am. Well, breakfast isn't ready yet. But here, take this juice and an orange, she said as she gave Mac and I the snack. Sometimes when Mac and I returned home from school, there were signs that Betty had been there. Instead of her leaving food, there would be syringes, bottle tops with cotton balls in them, and small rubber holes scattered throughout the apartment on the floor. At 6 years old, I knew more about the hard facts of drug usage than most adults did. I have to admit that I never saw Betty actually shoot drugs into her veins, but she did not hide her addiction from Mac and me. Betty, are you in there? I said, knocking on the bathroom door late one night. There was no answer. Are you in there? I said once more. I knew she was in there. I could see the bathroom light under the door. I heard her come into the apartment a few minutes earlier. If she wasn't answering me, it could only mean one thing. She was getting high. Finally, go back to bed, girl, she said. But just do what I said, she said. But I had to go to the bathroom, I said. I'll be out in a moment, she said slowly. I could hear the difference in her voice now. It seemed to take forever before she actually came out of the bathroom. She had that look on her face that I had seen so many times before. I knew she was high. I didn't say a word. I was afraid she would know that I knew what she was doing in the bathroom, and this would upset her, even if she were high. So we're going to stop here in this particular chapter, and we will pick up in my next reading. I hope that you will join me again as we continue down the path of a life not my own. Take care, everyone.